I think I'm very happy that we are beginning to talk about this. We started around 2018 when the World Economic Forum was trying to virtually tell everybody that the world is changing. And the world is changing because new technologies that had been discovered would become operational. And at that time, people didn't take it very serious when they started talking about those leading technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, virtual reality, Internet of Things, and simply because people did not understand the application. But since then, some countries have gone ahead. They are using AI, for example, for competitiveness as a nation. I actually have a new book about competing in the age of AI. So there are some countries which have gone ahead, especially China and the US. Europe is trying to run from behind and see what they can do. But at the same time, organizations have also gone ahead and started using AI for competitiveness. If you see the friction in the banking sector, it is because mobile platforms are using artificial intelligence to do things banks have never done before. For example, giving credit which is non-collateralized. They actually use data, artificial intelligence, to be able to predict that Ndemo can actually repay. If you give Ndemo, they can repay. To the extent that they can differentiate myself and Gyro, that Gyro has is more trusted, that they can give him 20,000 and they give me 5,000. Meaning that AI has actually been predicting almost to the point, because if you look at the default rate, sometimes it's less than 4%, which is much, much higher than the default in the banking sector, where they use hunch to see if I am dressed in a suit, I'm likely to repay. If someone is not wearing nice shoes, they may not repay. Those are the mechanisms that the banks used to use. Actually, there are many stories where you are told that an old man who had a lot of money goes to the bank and is told to walk out. But someone who is broke and wearing a three-piece suit is welcomed, given the loan, and then they default. So we are getting now to finer details of predicting who would actually be a better customer with respect to whom you lend to. But let me go through some of the definitions which Jairo went through very, very in much detail. But this one would now bring you to why the discussions we have. So I know Jairo defined this in a way, but artificial intelligence refers to the simulation. It's a machine that is simulating human intelligence. And you can only do that by having so much data to the extent that you can predict. For example, if someone collected the weather data for 100 years, chances are they would be able to predict. I remember my mom, who never went to school, she used to tell me, you go and do something on the shamba. And here I'm celebrating internally that it is going to rain because I've seen the rain. And she will tell me that rain is not coming to our side here. That is the kind of knowledge you gain after so many data gathering. For them, although they didn't have anywhere to write, they knew the rains that is coming from that side would not come to our place where I stayed. So the computer looks at several years and they can be able to predict precisely that you are actually going to get this much precipitation, and here you can get this. That is why we say a machine that collects all that data and is able to predict based on that data. And I'm going to give more examples on this. So these machines actually, they are programmed to think and mimic us human beings. But some of them have been made to actually learn and reconfigure themselves. And that is what is very scary, that we may not know what they are learning and what changes they are making to the principal program that created them. So the term may also be applied to any machine that exhibits traits associated with a human mind, such as learning and problem solving. They have created what they call self-learning machines, which they gather the data and they learn by themselves, and they are able to change. There's a huge debate on driverless cars, that they can mimic a human being, and if something else that other than human being crosses the road, the car would stop, because it would learn by itself that this is something that is either valuable to human beings or something like that. The debate is not conclusive yet. We are hoping to see. We have had, I think, 2 accidents since they started the driverless vehicles, which look on the road and know when to stop, when to move, when to speed, when to do all kinds of things. So that is the definition. Why is this important? Why now? Why do we want AI? The simple definition is that there is no human being who can process that much data, like rain patterns for 100 years, and be able to precisely predict what would happen based on the data that you have been that has been inputted. So artificial, it forms the basis of all computer learning, and is the future of all complex decisions. I gave you the weather pattern. That is very complex. Of course, you want to know whether in Japan now they are almost very close to predicting the earthquakes that they get mostly, and they are able to mitigate sometimes, but not everything. Meaning they have not gathered sufficient data for the machines to predict ahead of time. But a lot is happening, especially in weather. If you look at the hurricanes, they are actually able to predict to precise meters where it's going to go through, in parts where they have had so many of that. When we had a hurricane 2 years ago in Mozambique, several organizations warned that they remove people from an island, and the people refused and said there is nobody who can predict. Actually, we lost 2,000 people in that island. You saw the same in Indonesia, but it is highly unlikely that somebody who lives in areas of the US where there are many hurricanes, they actually are able to move because they have seen that the predictions work. So it's a logical evolution of machine learning and the deep learning, which are the foundational future of business decision making. I'm going to relate this now to a number of future things. So how do we govern artificial intelligence? There is not one country in the world that has come up with how to govern this, but it should be governed, because there is what we call AI for good and AI which is bad, which can it can be done in such a way that you would not even differentiate whether what is being presented is false or not. So AI should be under the same rules as humans, like the constitution, the laws that we have, which govern our behavior. So manufacturers should agree to abide by the general ethical guidelines mandated by international regulation. There should be understanding of how AI logic and decisions are made. This is very important, that we must be able to understand the logic and decisions. The Ministry of Public Service brought a software for sorting applications. Usually when you say like you need 10 clerks, they would get 10,000 applications. Even if you had so many people to sort them out and give everybody a chance, it's very, very difficult to go through that number of applications. So they did that so that AI can sort through and summarize the ones that meet the qualifications. But what they discovered was that it was discriminating. The algorithm inside there was not favorable to women. Maybe the person who developed the algorithm was thinking about the best candidate who is a white male, meaning that both they would discriminate and even they almost didn't pass anybody, meaning there was no white because there was a bias in the software. Those are the things we need to know. When we buy a system like that, to know that we need to know its biases. We were in Germany once, and we're being taken around how AI is functioning. The sensor did not recognize me as a human being, because the sensors they had would only recognize white people. As they were very embarrassed. Of course, we made jokes about it, but it's a serious omission on their part in terms of development. So I have been in the past, since the task force ended, I joined the OECD in creating the principles for AI. These are now OECD is like the leading in terms of global discourse towards regulating AI. And I'm sharing that knowledge to the Kenyan government, actually to mostly African governments. And then 2 months ago, I was also chosen to join. MIT is also started an initiative on how AI can be regulated. You may ask yourself, why don't we just go ahead and regulate? We don't know whether we can inhibit innovation or we can facilitate innovation if we went ahead with that. And that was even in our report. We said we needed something that we can be working with so that we understand how these things works. But generally, we have principles for AI for good, meaning AI should benefit people and the planet by driving inclusive growth, sustainable development, and the well-being of the people. So AI systems should be designed in a way that respects the rule of law, because they are acting like humans, human rights, democratic values, and diversity among us. Like I said, the software we bought was not seeing women at all. For example, I went through Germany, it was not seeing Black people. So it must be developed recognizing holistically who is a human being. And they should include appropriate safeguards, for example, enabling human intervention where necessary to ensure a fair and just society. Like now, the one the government bought, it didn't mean it is bad. It's that we needed to change the algorithm so that it takes into consideration those who are applying locally, both men and women. And I think because our constitution goes beyond that to disability, we should also include those selection criteria so that it can fit what we call AI for good. So AI systems must function in a robust, secure, and safe way throughout their life cycles, and the potential risks should be continually be assessed and managed. There is risk throughout. I'm going to point out a few risks that can bring legal issues. Then organizations and individuals developing, deploying, and operating AI systems should be held accountable for their proper functioning in line with the above principles. I wanted to discuss, I think most of you who have read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Strangers, AI was used to see the decision-making of the judges in New York. And they had AI make the decisions on the criminals who are brought to court. And the AI could make a decision whether the person deserves a bond. And I think 90% of the time, AI was correct that that person should not be given a bond. Based on the previous data, the criminal record has been abusive to the family, has been violent and whatnot and stuff. But when they come in front of the judge, they behave like angels from heaven. But AI is able to detect. But the judge actually failed almost as much as how AI had assessed, meaning they failed almost 90% of the time, meaning that they let go some of the criminals who should never have been left to go back onto the street. That AI was doing better than that. And they're still working on those studies because judges mostly say, I want to see the person seeking for a bond so that I can look them into the eye and determine whether they are telling me the truth. But they are not able to do that. AI is able to detect based on what it has been fed and the behavior patterns of criminals. So there are cases where it is better than us, and there are cases where human beings are better than this. Let us move to the next presentation. What governments should do actually is to facilitate public and private investment in research and development to spur innovation and trustworthy AI. We actually cannot, if you got my presentation from above, that we cannot take the studies that are done in New York and implement in our context because of what I said, that the algorithms created in the US focuses on that context. So we also need, if we want to use them in code here, the way our eyes, the way our face, the way we present ourselves, there are ways you can know who is honest and who is dishonest, which I used to have a problem as a student in the US where the person talking to you wants attention, you want your eyes on their eyes, and I thought it wasn't correct for me to put my eyes straight into another person's eye, which is our cultural thing. But then the Americans think that you are shy or weak if you are not eye to eye. And we're trying to implement that in a different cultural setup. So we actually must invest. If it's the court system, we must invest ourselves, invest in that so that we create our own algorithm based on what I've said, that the biases are there and you don't want, we can't be doing like we've been buying textbooks from foreign countries and applying them locally. So we must foster accessible AI ecosystem with the digital infrastructure and technologies and the mechanisms to share data and knowledge. One of the things we wanted to do, there's a time when I was in the ministry, we wanted to link, because the problem we wanted to solve, criminals are brought from committee to the courts and taken back. There was an accident once when many of them died. So we said, since we have fiber, why can't they, a judge, even in Mombasa, take what you lawyers call the plea, instead of them being brought directly. But that was that the judge needed to see the person whom they are talking with. It didn't matter. If you are asking somebody if he killed someone and he says, no, that's all you need. But then there's a lot of dynamics in that you can take that and begin to study and see who is lying. Even in our context, and I use my mother a lot, she used to know when I have lied, and I don't know what method she used to know that, but I think it's something that can be studied and be able to apply it, to be applied in evidence. And I'm sure if we talk to each one of you, your moms, and they're not more, fathers didn't care. Your moms could tell when you're not feeling good, even without talking, even with just seeing the face. This is the data that we need to have and be able to help in other areas. So number 3 is to ensure a policy environment that would open the way to deployment of trustworthy AI systems. So empower people with the skills for AI. We need to develop capacity and support workers for a fair transition. If we just think that we're going to rely on other countries, this is not the time. Previously, we could go by, but this time, because it's data, we must collect our own data. If it's a criminal justice system, we collect our data in that space. If it's education, we collect our data in that. So cooperate across borders and sectors to progress on responsible stewardship of trustworthy AI. We need, from the AU level, I know there are initiatives, but they are not taken seriously. Some few countries must take steps. So when we were creating this, they made sure they had people from all over the world. I represented Africa, others from Asia, to develop universal principles and recommend to government. That's why we thought that everybody should do their own deeper studies. Let me move on. So let me talk about the applications and talk about the problems relating to the data aspect, which I said it is very critical. I said earlier, non-collateralized loans, mobile loans, it is pure artificial intelligence which is running those systems. Fulisa, you have Branch, you have Tala, all those are using AI. And they are making good money because almost 98% people repay. We are seeing in health, especially the area of radiology, if some X-ray was taken and there's a tumor that has been taken, it can be instantly be analyzed in India, in the US. So radiologists that can collaborate, they can also bring millions of similar images, and they are able to predict what that tumor or how many of those tumors were removed and how were they removed and what was the survival rate. So diseases like cancer now, they are getting very close to understanding what is curable, not curable, or all kinds of things from health. I will show you a picture down on that. In education, we are just beginning. In Kenya, we have a small school called Shule. It's online, which helps with what we call adaptive learning. Adaptive learning, for those who don't understand it, is that when we went to school, most of us, we used to think that those who are slow and did not understand, the way God created us is that some people may not receive or understand content in the same speed as others, because some have what you call dyslexia, some have got autism, some have got hyperactiveness. All these have problems, but those are not problems. It is the way God created them. To the extent that we used to think there are people who are stupid and others who are clever, those who are number ones. But if they've discovered through AI that if you provided content at a speed that they understand, they would actually do better than those who are number ones in class. So meaning that there isn't somebody who is completely stupid. Even those with autism, whom you behave in certain ways because you think they are foolish, they are not foolish. The system knows how to educate them and give them a life. So meaning that it is now a chance for us not to leave anyone behind, because AI can assist in identifying and telling us strategies which we can use to help many of us, many of our children whom we would have actually ignored and assumed that they are stupid. In agriculture, I'll show you a picture later, and I think Jairos talked about it. It is being applied widely in agriculture. You are going to see that previously our farming was random. That, oh, if you are here, just plant maize and whatnot, instead of looking at the soil alkalinity, the acidity, and then asking what crop can grow here best, what can I maximize from this piece of land? And the people begin now to use scientific information to be able to help. And all this goes towards achieving SDG goal number 1, reduction of poverty, because you are able to do something that would contribute to the sustainability of humanity. So transportation, you have seen the smart sensors in the city of Nairobi. If you look at the crime rate, ever since those cameras were put in Nairobi, the car checking in the city center went down. And whichever side they put the carjacking, which was so widespread, went because they knew the police will know which direction you are, and probably you'll be stopped. In meteorological department, I talked about it. The weather patterns, Jaira talked about it. In customer relationship, the chatbots are now very popular. You actually think that you are talking to a human being, but it's not a human being you're talking to. It is a computer which is responding to your questions, and sometimes even better than a human. What you are seeing here is radiology. You can be taken an X-ray here in Nairobi, and doctors in New York, in Singapore, in India would see that and discuss. Actually, you actually discuss and say, we have never seen this, or we have seen this, and this is the prognosis. That actually helps. This collaboration would help improve even our healthcare, where we would not have improved, because it's very easy to collaborate. Actually, it's even going to make it much cheaper, meaning that the county hospitals could have experts from Nairobi without them going onto the ground and say that patient needs to be operated immediately, the patient can be brought to Nairobi, or patient, in this case, we can't handle here in Kenya. So the decision making has been improved in healthcare. In farming, what that drone is doing, it goes through and it will tell you where the nutrients are getting are not in the right amount. Then you can actually go and put the nutrients so that you can have uniform harvests throughout. This is being done even here. We have a lot of young people doing drones. There are drones which are monitoring and seeing the growth of the crop. If you want to maximize production, you need this. Sometimes you look at this and think it's very expensive. It isn't. Once data has been gathered and the computer can analyze very quickly, there is no need why we should have hunger in this country. Let me give you one example that just when I was young, in Kenya, we used to harvest 40 bags of maize from 1 acre. Today, we harvest only 5 bags an acre, meaning that we are actually encouraging poverty. And all this data is with us, but nobody remembers to interrogate the data and ask, why are we getting poorer? Or why are we getting to import food all the time? We're importing food because we're not using data. And we don't have the systems to give us previous data. How much, what happened to the soil? How have we used this in the soil? And begin to predict. If we are able to predict that if I grew maize and get 40 bags an acre, younger people will be more interested in agriculture because they can predict what they're going to get. Right now, nobody wants to go into agriculture, even when they don't have jobs. It's because the way we perceive farming, that my parents, my relatives are so poor in farming and stuff. But AI can enable us to be able to improve productivity in ways we would never have done before. But you need to be aware of data. So what Kenya has done is that the task force which Cyrus was referring to, we just recommended a legal sandbox. And we call it a regulatory sandbox, which is a framework set up by a regulator that allows fintechs, not just fintechs, that allows any innovation and other innovators to conduct live experiment in a controlled environment under regulator supervision. We already have one in CMA, and for those of you who want to see how it works, it's very easy to see how it works. Within that space, there are legal frameworks governing CMA, and they will default onto their legal frameworks. If, for example, you are raising money because you are issuing a coin and raising money to build up your company, they would use the same principles they are using in the main stock, the stock markets and stuff. So you have a chance to innovate, at the same time chart into a new territory that nobody understands. It's going to take time before you begin to see regulatory regimes around artificial intelligence, because we are seeing more benefits than the damage that AI is causing. Of course, I didn't have to write a lot of the negatives. You saw the example of Venezuela, where they sent a drone with a bomb, and they calculated, but in their calculation, they missed by like a few inches. So it dropped the bomb very, very near where the president was. that is using AI for negative things. So we need AI for good. There is a lot more that is happening in AI that is very negative. You are going to see a lot of it in the campaigns in Kenya this year. Of course, a system like TikTok is powered by AI, meaning you can create your things there. You can take my voice and my information, use your voice, and someone say Ndemo was saying these bad things. And that is the danger of AI, serious danger. By the time I get to prove that it was not me, and I know intentions of making such statements, you would have messed up my name. I think as one of the politicians I suffered that, where they used this, the systems in a way he appeared to be doing, I think you understand that. I don't want to say names, but these are all legal issues that are going to come up as AI becomes much more deeply entrenched in our society.